everyone, and welcome to another Featured Teachers, our webinar series brought to you by the American TESOL Institute. I have the privilege of hosting this great series. My name is Jason Levine, better known as Fluency MC, and I am here today with our featured teacher for the month of October 2021. It is Elena Mutonono. Elena, welcome to the program.
Jason, thank you for having me, and hi, everyone.
It's really great to have you here, especially because so often we hear from teachers who are curious, or maybe even more than curious, about starting their own English teaching business. You have this great thing going where you offer wonderful advice and more to teachers who either want to be entrepreneurs or realize that they need to do that if they want to have more control over their careers as teachers. And there's a lot of competition out there, obviously, especially in English language teaching. So it'll be really great to hear what you have to say on that topic. And yeah, welcome. And please, if you could begin by just introducing yourself, telling us a bit about who you are and how you got to where you are now.
All right. So I'm Elena Mutonono. I live currently in New Orleans, Louisiana. I've been here for over 10 years. But before that, I lived in Ukraine. That's where I grew up. And, I went to a language school to train as an English and German teacher and foreign literature. I graduated from college and then went to get my master's. Our college that I went to was like a joint venture between a college in the US in Kentucky and a college in Crimea. And so after I graduated with honors, I got the scholarship to go and get a master's degree in the US.
In Kentucky.
Was amazing.
In Kentucky.
Yeah.
Wow,
Kentucky, yes.
Kentucky, Crimea. That's pretty interesting.
I know. That is pretty wild. And yes, and it's a small private school. So it's like, if you're not careful, you're driving on the interstate and it's like, oh, where is it? Oh yeah, it's gone. I was there.
But you enjoyed it. You enjoyed both.
Yes, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed everything because to me, I like smaller things. I am generally an introverted, like I don't really do well in crowds. So I liked that environment because all the professors were approachable and you could talk more than just, and see them in their office hours and after their office hours. So that was good. And then when I went back to Ukraine, I wanted to work at the same college. And I wanted to teach English in a way that I hadn't been taught English. I wanted to bring in something that was new and fresh. And I used a lot of music because that was another thing I was passionate about. And anytime in Ukrainian schools or Russian schools, you start a language major, it starts with, 6 to 8 weeks of accent training. And so that's something that I was super passionate about. First year freshman class and doing that 6 or 8 intensive weeks of accent training.
I just want to ask
and I brought in a lot of music.
Did you get, sorry to interrupt, but did you get interested in that just you have the good fortune of that happening, or you already knew that school had that focus and you were looking forward to it? I mean, were you already interested?
I think I was already interested. I had taken classes prior to going to college. I had taken classes of my tutor was very much into pronunciation. Okay. So she was like,
so you weren't being introduced for the first time to this idea.
Right. I had known about it, but I didn't think that the way it was taught at the college where I was, I didn't think it was as intensive or comprehensive that I would have liked. So when I went back, that's what I was doing. And I really enjoyed it. And I worked there for about 7 or 8 years, and I just wanted to continue. Now, of course, I got so involved and I really enjoyed it. I was passionate about it, got burned out. So then my health forced me to kind of shift gears and downscale a little bit. So I went from full-time to part-time. And I discovered that I really like the aspect of freedom when you are part-time. particularly like the days when I didn't have to go into school. It was a very good. It felt great. And so I think gradually, even though I saw myself at college long term, and I was even trying to get into a university, get into my PhD program. It somehow didn't work out. Then I tried to, maybe I want to go overseas and work as an English teacher, or see how I could do that for a short time. And
so,
that
so
didn't work out.
did you feel like at that point kind of caught between academia and sort of the research direction, the publishing direction, the university teaching, and teaching and having the freedom to teach for a little while in another country, or you were starting to really know which one it was?
Yeah, I did not know. I kind of liked both. I also at the time was doing translation, Russian to English and back. And I kind of liked that as well. But at a certain point that went away really quickly, because I figured if I wanted to grow, I had to choose whether I wanted to teach or I wanted to translate.
Oh, you mean you needed a niche?
Yes, exactly. That was my new introduction. That was my very first introduction to niching or niching. However,
sorry, I say both. I'm one of those people. I say niche one time, and I'll say niche another time. So
right,
that
was my.
You're the expert on that word, so we'll go with whatever you call it.
Yeah, niching. But that was the first time when I said, okay, I need to do something. And then, of course, later that it was, do I want to go the route of academia? Do I want to go and do research in social phonetics, which I was very excited about. And I wanted to study in particular the Kentuckian, the Appalachian accent and its connection to
all kinds of
Scottish
really
English
stuff with there. Yeah, wow.
I know. So, and I had a lot of interviews, and I had been doing that, and I really enjoyed doing that. But the aspect of freedom was really strong. And when I went from full-time to part-time, I figured it was like, oh, that feels great. Like I feel better. But that was before even anything happened that would even compel me into the direction of business, because I had never thought I would be a business owner.
Yeah, so the freedom part was developing, but not the entrepreneurial part.
Right. I still had that thought in my mind that, business was something for special people. I did not have the business mind. I did not have the savvy.
So when did that change, or am I jumping ahead too quickly? I mean,
no, we're actually almost at that point, because the school where I was, it shut down. And I was already thinking about moving to the US, because I was dating a man that would soon become my husband. So I went to the US to stay for about 6 months. And I thought, and I had by then been tutoring some people that I had worked with, and I just offered to them to do it via Skype. And
what
they
year
agreed.
is this?
And
just to put it in perspective.
That was 2009.
2009. Okay, Skype. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So it was Skype mainly. And so for the 6 months, I tried to, kind of figure things out. It was around that time that I also wrote a grant to the U.S. Embassy. I think it was called American Regional English Language Office, something like that.
Okay.
In Kiev. And
the Relo office. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I know. I work as an English specialist, so I go to
exactly.
Relos all the time.
Yes. Yeah. I was trying to remember that little abbreviation there.
Yeah.
So I wrote a grant for that would allow me to work with teachers and train them how to teach online. And my idea was, okay, I want to train teachers how to use more cutting edge technologies. And I did get the grant, believe it or not, which was crazy. And I started implementing it while I was living in the US, and I tried to get teachers into webinars, and I was doing my first webinars at the end of 2009. And that was tough. And that's when I realized, like, wow, like it's one thing when you have clients or you tutor some people and you go on Skype and you continue with them, and then they have their friends and they come to you, and lo and behold, 6 months later, you have like a really nice load. But if people are not aware of you and you just walk out there and say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this, it's very hard. And I thought after my first webinar, which thankfully Zoom now, but back in the day, it was some kind of really, really
I remember
bad
those
technology.
days.
After my first webinar, I just cried and I said, never again.
Yeah.
I had probably 2.5 people. I always tell the story, a half, meaning one person was coming in and out the entire time. The second person had no idea that they had to, what webinar was. And they didn't think that they would hear me. So they just signed in and they were watching the presentation and they kept asking me questions on the chat. And I was like, why is this person pestering me? Well, they never heard anything from me. They were just listening and reading the slide. So after they read the slide, they were like, okay, let me ask the question. The third person was thankfully able to do both. But those were the old days. And that was my very first webinar. And I still have that dread of every single time I have a webinar, which these days, thankfully, I never have like 2.5 people. Usually it's more, but I still have that existential dread.
Yeah, trauma. I get it. It was stressful. I mean, I did them all the time on WizIQ. I was working for WizIQ as a kind of ambassador, somebody trying to bring people over to the platform, teachers over, and I was bringing them over to a platform that had all kinds of problems on it. So it was just like,
it was buggy.
What am I doing?
Buggy.
Yeah. So what happened next then? You realized,
and so it was really hard. So, and then at that point, even though I really enjoyed working with teachers, and I had done as much as I could, I tried all different things, but I couldn't get teachers to come to me. So I thought, I am going to work with students and make sure I have enough money, and whatever money I make, then I can work with teachers. Because the way the Relo grant worked is, the idea was, you start this program and then it becomes kind of self-sustainable. Well, it never did. I had no idea how to make it self-sustainable, because I was like, well, what's wrong? Like, I have a website, I built a website. I created this piece. I do webinars. Nobody's coming. Like, I have no way of reaching people. I thought, well, maybe if I just work with students, then I will learn how to work with teachers, and eventually I will do that.
Right.
And most of my students at the time were from Russia, Ukraine, all the Russian-speaking world. And so I did that, and slowly, like, I just I didn't have any teachers, and I realized that I got burned out and I was just teaching too much, and I did not have time left for teachers. So I was like, well, maybe one day I will come to it. So 5 years later, 5, in 2014 was when these events started happening. Crimea became a part of Russia, and then all the economic distress that it brought about, the war in Eastern Ukraine, I'm sorry, and all the stuff that was happening, how it was affecting people. Inflation went up, and so I started losing clients. So because I couldn't lower my rates, but they couldn't afford to pay me anymore.
Sure.
And I lost about, I think, 95% of my clientele, like slowly, one by one. And also it was getting to be very draining teaching, because every single time.
So you were noticing that at the same time? It wasn't like a cause and effect thing? I mean, two things were happening at once. One, that people were leaving because they had no choice, even though they would prefer to work with you, but also that it was draining. So you mean that it was kind of good in a way?
I mean, when I look back, I was glad that, I mean, it's kind of weird to say, but I was glad that circumstances turned out to be this way, because if they hadn't, then I think I would have just stuck through it, because that's how I do stuff, like even those years before the college where I had worked shut down and I had to, figure out what I was doing. I felt like, well, I'm just going to stay here. And then just circumstances had to change externally for me, at least.
Well, this
to
is
get the
very,
picture.
very reminiscent. I mean, this is like so many stories been hearing recently with COVID and the pandemic. Is that I didn't realize until I had to stop what I was doing that I wanted this, or that it was too much anyway, or
Right. Yes. And so to me, it was kind of good, because it was a time to sit and ask myself, like, do I want to even salvage what I am losing? Because that was a question too, because by then I had teachers working for me. So I had several teachers working for me. I was really busy, and I thought, do I want to salvage this, or do I want to just forget about it and start all over?
Did you think about changing the market? I mean, looking at for students in other parts of the world, or that wasn't something you would?
So that was the deciding factor. I realized from my own experience, which I now, when I work with clients, I tell them it's probably, unless you are living in a particular area and you have a way of connecting with people locally, I don't think if people are going online, it's wise to limit themselves. Maybe they can do it for a short period of time, but then because you get dependent on one geographic segment, and something goes wrong,
right? Like what happened?
And then and I lost everything. And so, and I know a lot of other teachers that experienced the same thing back in 2014. And so for me, what was more important at that time was to figure out the one niche that I wanted to pursue, and to switch to English, because prior to that, I had done everything in Russian. All of my marketing, blogging, whatever I had done was in Russian. And tried to figure it out all from zero.
And when you say try to figure out the niche, it wasn't like you had this you knew instantly. It wasn't like an epiphany. Is that what you mean?
No, it wasn't actually. It was just the things that I liked. So I thought, okay, because prior to that, I had taught, a person comes to me, they want to prepare for tests. Okay, a person is in the business field. Okay. But then I was like, well, do I really like it? And I realized that what I really enjoyed was accent training and teacher training. Those were the things that I really enjoyed. Now, I wasn't particularly sure how I would go, like how it would evolve, but I wanted to do just those two things. And I couldn't choose the one until a few years later. But because I had to, again, I got to a point where I was like, I can't keep doing two things. People are getting confused. I'm getting confused.
So what led you to choose? I mean, I know, but you can maybe tell us which one was it?
So I was doing accent training. I did quite well. I had a really robust, as you remember, account on Instagram, and I really enjoyed doing what I was doing. I focused on linking. We're all nerds here, so I focused on linking. Instead of, because usually pronunciation, a lot of teachers would go into the sounds and all that stuff. And
you were doing rhythm,
and fluency and flow of the speech. It was really important for me, because I remembered I drew on my experience when I had taught years prior. I had taught in the college, and the students would learn how to pronounce certain sounds, and they would like practice all those drills and words, and then they try to read, and then it's like the stresses are off.
Well, and not to mention the fact, I mean, we could do a whole
Yes, I know.
This is my area too when it comes to pronunciation, but it's also what I discovered. I have a feeling you discovered it too early on. Is that if you start with the stress and the reduced speech and the connected speech, the linked words, you get into the sounds that way.
Right.
you know, and, you know, so like the whole idea of like teaching all of those sounds and then sort of starting over, like,
and then later,
like,
yes.
then it's, you know, oh, then all these new sounds that happen and don't happen when you're speaking. It's like, why would you do that? You know, why wouldn't you, if you start with the rhythm? Plus, most communication problems are a result of like, you know, the wrong word stress or sentence stress anyway.
Yes.
And in those cases also you find, oh, it's because the vowel was too short or too long.
Yeah.
But it's part of the stress issue.
Right.
Not something.
And listening. I mean, we struggle with listening to teach these kids listening. Of course, I can go on forever, but it also comes, I know how listening improved drastically when I focused on stress and rhythm.
Absolutely. So we'll have to do another session on this.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll get nerdy.
We can have fun, and we could I think help some people out there with our experience in that area. Yes. So you did that, but the way you're talking about it, and you know, you say you used to have this robust Instagram account. Okay, so you're doing well, but then what changed?
Yes, and on the side, I'm still trying to revive my teachers account. So I went on LinkedIn I was on Instagram for my accent training, but I was on LinkedIn for teachers. And I created a blog where I would write about how to teach online, you know, how to find students, But
I thought you said you realized you couldn't do two things. So
at first I did too. Yeah. Okay. But I did that for actually 3 years.
Okay. But when was that moment where you were like, I can't?
Yeah, it was I realized that some of the teachers I was teaching and training, they were also, you know, following me as an accent trainer. And I was beginning to realize that people were overwhelmed by the stuff that I sent to them, because if they're learning how to teach online, then I send them newsletters about this, or invitations to webinars about this if they are interested. But a lot of people were interested in both things, and then they would get confused and I would get confused, and I was too busy. So I got to a point, it was like, I can't do both things. I need to choose. And that was one of the hardest choices, because financially, accent training was better than teacher training at the time anyway. And when I deleted my Instagram account, burned all those contacts that I had, you know, because I deleted all my lists, I realized that, okay, now I can just focus on working with teachers. And it was really, really difficult in the beginning. Just the whole, I think it took me a few months to get to that point.
Did you feel like you'd made the wrong choice, or it wasn't like that? It was more just you needed time?
I think it was the right choice for me. I think it was the right, because I went back to, what do I really, really, really want? Like, what keeps me awake at night? And I realized that, I love accent training. I love music and it's amazing. But what I really, really love is empowering teachers. So that made the choice sort of easy. But financially, then I was like, how am I going to make it viable? So that was a different story after that.
And the things you had to do to make it viable are those things that you then used to empower teachers? Right kind of journey? Because that's sort of the way it seems to me.
Yeah. So with teachers, it was interesting, because when I chose working with teachers, I let go of accent training. My income was kind of like more money coming from accent training, and maybe about 40% from teacher training. And so I was leaving 40%, getting rid of 60, and then moving to the new year. And in the new year, I was able to make up the difference, which is crazy to think about. So I made the same amount, but only with one niche.
So can you start talking? Because I'm sure people watching this are thinking like, okay, what did you do? Yes. Like, can you start as you're telling your story? Can you tell us, you know, things you did or didn't?
So from the very beginning, obviously, when I made a choice, I already had the contact, so I was able to work. I had already built the 3 years of foundation.
You weren't starting from nothing, right?
Right. So the 3 years, what I did was I had been writing and blogging. So that was my number one thing. And the reason I chose blogging and writing was practical, because I mean, I like videos, but at the time I had 2 little kids And there was just no way that I could have a quiet place for, and the right lighting, because during the day, then the kids are running, so you can't do this. And so then in the evening, you can't always record yourself, and it just takes you, and you're already tired. So I started writing, and because I could do it even in the evening, or I could wake up really early, wearing my pajamas and write my blog post. So that was that. But I had them on my blog. And then I also went on LinkedIn and I joined a lot of groups for teachers. And because I noticed there were lots of questions about how do I start a business and how, and I would respond to those questions for a while. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to write a blog post. So I would write a blog post and share it on LinkedIn, and more people would join. And
I want to jump in. Sorry, it's just so important, because you're saying, how do I start a business? And before, when you're talking about it, you're talking about helping teachers learn how to teach online. So when did that change? I feel like we didn't really talk, because you mentioned earlier that you didn't really think about business, or feel like you did. So when did it come to that? I mean, how did that happen, where you felt like, and teachers felt like they could come to you for advice about how to start their own teaching business?
Yeah, I think the moment when I began writing my own stuff and sharing from my own experience, how in the beginning, when I was training teachers, the way I was doing it, even though I did share and I bring in some of the things that I was learning, most of the content I was using was somebody else's. Okay. So I would say, okay, in order to do this, you need to use, for example, videos. And here are some YouTube channels that you can use for your classes, right? So that was the type of training that I was doing. Now, I think my perspective changed from a teacher to a business owner when I started owning stuff. Okay. So I would write my own blog posts with my own ideas about how to teach online, how to build a business, how to bring in new students, how to, and I was very particular about writing specifically for language teachers. At the time, it was online English teachers, and eventually I switched to online language teachers.
But so the business side, when you say, giving them advice about business, were you at the same time also learning yourself and researching this, or it just came completely from your experience starting your own business?
It was a lot of things were from my own experience of teaching by Skype. So by then I had been doing that for 5 years. So I had a lot of, and I was able to answer a lot of questions. And I also discovered that it was very difficult to find adequate advice for online language teachers anywhere online. So you would go, at the time, at least, you would have, coaches telling you how to start these, 6-figure businesses. And every single time I went, I felt like, well, that just doesn't work for me. Like, it doesn't apply. And so that's why that was my goal. I want to create something or write something that people will benefit from, that people like in my shoes will benefit from.
I get it. Great. And you started to enjoy it even more.
Yeah. So for a year, I was blogging and engaging on LinkedIn. Another thing that I did, I would go on other websites that already had a blog and say, would you like for me to submit an article? So people like Andre Klein, Learn Out Live, he has a lot of materials for German speakers, but he also had a teacher's blog at the time. And he still has those articles that go back all the way, to 2015. When I started submitting them to different publications. Is that
something you'd recommend doing still? And I'm also saying that because maybe you could throw in some tips either now or later, like what things could teachers do, just blogging, but not just blogging, as you're saying, like
it's creating, like I said, I think your idea, your mindset shifts from that of a teacher that holds a textbook or maybe a website, somebody else's website, to a business owner when you start creating your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is, maybe you want to create worksheets for something, or you're building together workbooks, or in your case, videos with materials that go with them. So then it changes. Like, you are no longer like, I don't need other people. I mean, you can bring in, of course, you're building on, but you can create your own stuff. But it's not enough, because a lot of times teachers will say, okay, I created this stuff. I have this blog.
This is the most important point.
Right. And people will be like, come to me. And why are people not coming to me? Or they will be like, oh, I asked all of my 10 clients to tell other clients. But you cannot take your responsibility of marketing and put it on your clients.
That's right.
So you need to network. And so networking is super important. And so building those connections. And as I started writing to, Fluent U, they had a blog. So I wrote for them as a language teacher, though, for other things, I reached out to you and, Andre, but with Andre, we had like 4 years, and a lot of people found me through his blog. People that later ended up buying my books and working with me one-to-one, and so this is something that teachers really hesitate doing, and something that I highly recommend, even in my coaching programs. And it's not easy, because you always think, oh, what if people think that I'm stealing their clients? But if you go there and say, I really like your content, I can contribute. Right. And if a person has their own blog, they are looking for content. And if you are a creator, you want to contribute it.
As hard as it could be, like you're saying, it's more of like a confidence thing. That's something that's maybe, I think, easier to overcome for some teachers than the idea of doing, like, taking marketing classes and learning how to create. And not that that's not important, but you're talking about something, right, that's a little bit more like what teachers already do, networking, and sort of just getting over that, like, you've got cool stuff, like, other people want to see it, but then is that enough? Or is there what I just mentioned? Like, do they need to learn about sales funnels? Do they need to learn about, like, all that stuff that maybe intimidates them about,
it's kind of like in language learning. You learn something, you get to a certain level, and it's like, okay, I've taken as much as I can, now I need a little bit higher. And so you need to keep building up. Like, every single time you get to a point where you're constricted by your environment, and then you say, okay, I either stay here or I need to find some other environment for me that will help me develop. So the same thing, like, I was a Skype teacher, and it was okay until I felt like I was burnt out. And also I was losing my passion for teaching, and I did not want to do that. And that model where I was, there was no way for me to lose my burnout or like deal with my burnout and regain my passion. So I had to do something different. And I thought, well, what am I truly passionate about? And you just stop teaching all the other stuff and get niche, niche down. So the same thing, I think, when, after you network and you have like a good number of people that know you, then it's really important then for you to continue communicating with these people already. So for instance, when I went on all these publications and there was sign up for my newsletter, it was very important for me to get on schedule and write that newsletter, send out updates, and connect with the people. So it's one thing when they read your article and they really liked you and they signed up. But then like 2 weeks later, they forgot about you, because you know how internet is. So it's very, very important to build that network and to keep that. So that's where you need to know some of the marketing things, but it's not like that now you need to go and get a degree in marketing, which is what I thought, oh, now I need to go.
But certain areas that I guess when you're working with teachers, you talk about like an email list.
Yeah, because you will ask yourself, okay, so what's next? Like, okay, I've made all these contacts. What is next? And now all these people know me. They've signed up, and I have a list of, several hundreds of people. What do I do with them?
But what if a teacher says, you know what, I recognize that I'm going to have to, have a newsletter, build up an email list. They look online or they talk to someone and they say, you know what, I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to, and maybe talking about someone I know here. Meaning me, like just that, I don't want to have anything to do with that. It's not that I don't believe in it. I realize it's not enough just to have a good network. It's not enough to have good content. There is marketing and sales involved if you really want to make money from it and grow a business. So what would you say to teachers? Because I know there are a bunch of us like me out there that just don't want to have anything to do with that side of it. Not that we want to eat it too. Like, it's not like, how can, it's more like, well, then I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, and I'm not going to be the entrepreneur because I'm not going to do that,
Right. Well, and that's where what comes to mind then, and I do that with my coaching programs when I, for example, train people how to create your product and all that stuff. There's always this question of, how do you feel about marketing, or how do you feel about promotion? Because we get to a point where there's no longer external hurdles for us. We know we know that you need, I need a list, or we know that I need a newsletter, and all those things. It's just how we feel about it that is really keeping us from it. And then it's just like in language learning. Imagine you have a student who is 100% sure that, past 40, you can never learn a new language. And so no matter what you do with that student, that subconscious belief, that like resistance to learning a language is going to then reflect on how they perform.
So you're saying it's similar to that. It's just getting beyond that. Right. Really, but even to the point, like, you've never had people get beyond it and then feel, but I'd really rather spend my time doing other things besides marketing and sales? Or you think that they just all start once they get beyond that mental block or whatever, they all get into the flow of sales and marketing?
I think so. There's two factors. The first factor is the kind of work that you do, because if the work that you're doing keeps you busy and it really drains you, like the actual work of teaching, and does not give you space for anything else, then something has to be done about that. And that's where I talk about, working smarter, where I help teachers move from one-to-one lessons and redesign their curriculum in such a way that they are not constantly like either in front of the screen or teaching, where they can have a day or maybe 2 days where they're not teaching, which is, for many teachers, it's like, at first it's like, huge. Oh, that's sacrilege. Like, oh no, I'm a teacher. I need to be teaching all the time, like even at night. So for them to even accept the fact that like your worth does not derive from how many hours you teach, like you're still a good teacher. Like it was very hard for me when I niched down, and that was a big block for me, because I felt like as a professional, I had to help everybody. And when I had this block where, like, if I were to say no to some people, that means I'm not qualified to help them. But that has nothing to do with it. So I had to like work with that and say, okay, this is really weird.
Right.
So the mindset piece is super important, just to go back and say, and then the actual load, like maybe you are taking too much on, and maybe you can rethink how you can slowly, and until that happens, until you give yourself enough space, you can't really get into marketing, because then it will be on your margins, and then you will hate it, because it will actually really, and it will
work. It also won't work.
Exactly. It will not work.
Yeah.
So those two, once you work to and you have enough space, then you look at marketing and say, okay, so what stories do I tell myself? And I just wrote a newsletter for my audience, but I talked about how the stories we tell ourselves, and one of the stories being, it's never going to work for me. So that's what I hear from a lot of teachers that start, running a business, and it's like, oh, no matter what I try, it's just never going to work for me. It's never going to work for me. And so, of course, then it kind of translates into, then they do marketing or they do their work, with less confidence.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
So like it becomes, whether you believe it or not, the materializing of your thoughts, but it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I was just going to say that took the word right out of my mouth.
Right. Yes, you just do that. And I realized, like, as I was writing, I was giving examples, like, why did I think that, for example? Well, for me, a real deal story was when the Soviet Union fell apart and I was preteen. Soviet Union falls apart and my parents lose their jobs, or their jobs become very, they hold on to their jobs, but they're very much devalued. So they're being paid really much less than they used to. And then they work like 10 to 12 hours. And it's very hard. Then I start hearing stories of these people with PhDs that are now driving cabs because they can't feed their families. And nothing will ever change. That was kind of like, the cloud over me that I grew up with. And so now when I realized, okay, so the reason I feel like, it's never going to work for me whenever something doesn't work, and then I make this self-fulfilling prophecy, the reason I do that is because of my past. But it wasn't the past. It no longer has control over you.
That's right.
And you are in charge of your future.
That's
so
right.
Like viewing those things, even marketing, like, why do you feel that about marketing? Or why do teachers feel bad about sales? What stories did they grow up with? And say, okay, well, I grew up with a story that somebody, a business owner next door that I really liked, he was struggling and he never made a penny. Well, but that business owner does not own your business.
That's right. No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Right. So all of these things, they're really important. And when you realize that mindset shift, how important it is, it really creates a different reality. And then you go in with more confidence, like, okay, well, if that person has no influence over me, then I can make my own, decisions.
Interesting. I have a question for you. You do so much with helping individual teachers figure out the different aspects of their business, and do you do any coaching of how to work with other people who do different? I mean, I'm sure you get into like, wow, if you're growing your business, maybe you're going to hire some people. But I'm not thinking that so much as having people work with you as you grow it, or are you always talking about this in terms of an individual needing to learn all the different aspects on their own?
Yes, I think in the beginning, it's very important that you know how your business works and that you also build it into a system. Because once it's built into a system, it's easy to bring people on. Because I must give a full disclaimer. Last month I went from a team of 2 people to a team of 4 people.
Wow! Congratulations.
And so yes, thank you. Yes, and I have a contractor that works on my podcasts. Somebody, of course, the accountant. But just going from that to, I was able to do that because I had a system in place, and for a long time, I was able to even use my other worker who is graphics designer, Veronica, to help me with other like admin things. But I got to a point where I feel like I think they're draining me. So now a new person is doing all that stuff. But it really helps, I think, because I had the experience of hiring somebody a little early, and I ended up paying her a lot more than I would have had I had a system in place.
Okay.
Because there was like a lot of back and forth, a lot of, let's do this, a lot of figuring out. And your assistant, as good as they might be that comes on, they're not going to help you figure out your strategy. This is what you need to do on your own with the help of a coach, maybe, in a group. But you need to figure it out yourself and set it up as a business. And then you bring on a person. And then this person, the success of this person is really your success, how successful you were to set it up. So yeah, I do work with people that want to hire someone, and I actually walk them through the process. But not all of the teachers that I worked with not all of them are at that stage
Oh,
yet.
I'm sure. Yeah. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's so much you can do without having to get
Right.
to that
You
stage.
can
If
have a
you,
lean team, and there's a
yeah,
lot of business people that have lean teams
right,
and work with contractors.
right.
So
Yeah.
it's really, really good to know how to run it. And that's where choosing and prioritizing and stripping things that you don't need
Yeah.
really helps. Because if you
Right.
get to a point, it's like, oh man, I need to hire somebody to help me with this. Well, first, maybe ask yourself, maybe you need to take something off your plate, because for the most part, that is the case.
So if a couple questions before we kind of wind things up here. First is, you've mentioned during this conversation different things that you've done with teachers to help them. Is there anything you haven't mentioned that you think is really important that teachers out there need to know if they're getting started or thinking about getting started, to have empowering empowering themselves as independent business owners or developing a business?
One of the things that I discovered, and particularly in our area, like we talked about it a little earlier about like networking, how teachers are doing that well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true when you're working for a school, but for some reason, when you start teaching online and it's your own gig, you feel like you are by yourself, or at least there is this pressure from somebody somewhere that you have to be self-made, whatever that means. And so people go into a business which needs a lot of support. There are times when it's very, very hard. And that's why you need to choose your niche based on what you really enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy it, when things get hard, it will be tough.
So you choose your niche, something you enjoy, but where does that support come from? What's your observation?
But the support I'm talking about is communities of teachers that are also teaching online, and they're also running their businesses. That will allow you, first of all, to make connections to help others promote you, so others can promote you, and you can promote others, so that you can, build collaborations and maybe create webinars together, so you can bring new people, and people will, see you for the first time. They say, oh, I like that teacher and all. So that's how it works. And for a long time, I personally did not know that that was even the thing. And we did not even have that many like communities for teachers.
So where are these communities?
So there's Facebook groups, right? There are Facebook groups for online teachers or online creators, entrepreneurs, where you can go and ask a question. If you have a question like, how do I start a list? Or what do I use this? Just really practical things. There are paid communities. Well, there's some on Facebook that are paid, but there's lots of others that are free. But you have to kind of look, if they're free, there's a cost to it. You will spend a lot of time looking for the right one. And then there are paid communities. I run a paid community called Smart Teachers Library. And I have helped, hundreds of teachers that have gone through the library over the past 4 years at different stages of their business. They join, they need to work on something, and they just make it a point to show up, once or twice a week in the forum and say, here's what I'm working, here's what I'm struggling with, here's where I need help, can you help me? And it's really cool because somebody will come and say, I have this speaking club and I can't get more than 10 people, can you help me? And people share in their networks, and then this person gets 25 people, and how cool that is.
That's great.
But that kind of creates that spirit of, collaboration, and also just a sounding board when things don't work right, or when you are struggling. It's so good to know that you're not the only one, because it's very hard for online teachers to find that type of support outside of their family. Even if their family are super positive, they still don't know what it's like.
It's not the same. So in addition to those communities in social media, any other suggestions you think maybe teachers aren't thinking about, or ways? Obviously, contacting you and doing some of the things you offer. Definitely, we need to share before we go how people can get in touch with you if they think they might want to work with you. But is there anything else you feel teachers should take away from what we're talking about today?
Yes, the second thing too, a good, like after you have this community and support, is to start creating something that is yours. And there's sometimes a lot of resistance, and a lot of people get like, lost in details. Like, do I create to sell? Like, don't think about creating to sell at this point, right? Because sometimes people and then perfectionism kicks in, and then they can't create because they just want it to be perfect. So, create and share it to hear people's feedback. What are people thinking?
Do you mean create it sort of as you are? I mean, you don't try to have this finished product, like sort of get it out there.
Right. So, for example, like if you create worksheets, put them out there. Maybe you create your own Facebook group, like your own community where people will join, and then you will share this. If you are, for example, teaching other teachers how to teach English, if your students are into, I don't know, collocations or, conversational, then maybe you create a podcast, listen to other people's podcasts, go to their podcasts, and then bring in your own edge, understand how you're different. Sometimes, we try to we shy away from what other people are doing, but also it can give us some ideas of what we want to do and what we definitely don't want to do. So that helps with the creative process. So creating something and putting it out there, maybe through YouTube or podcast or blog, like I said, and a blog is something that people can monetize. So that's how I made my first product. Is I took 12 of my best blog posts, and then I cleaned them up and I turned them into a book.
Yeah.
That is incredible experience. And that book is no longer there. It's changed now. But that first experience of publishing something of your own is really incredible, and it's empowering. So I think teachers should do that if they're thinking of okay, this is what, and reach out for help, obviously support group, because that's how hey, this is the idea that I have. What do you think? So it really helps that. And the third factor is, if they are already teaching online and if they're exhausted and burned out, they first need to tend to themselves. What can they do to lighten their load so they again are passionate about teaching? Because you can't create in burnout. You can't create when you are overwhelmed, because creativity needs space. And if you're constantly busy running from one gig to another, which I know it happens to all of us teachers, it's very difficult to create, and much less to build a business, because you just don't have that margin anymore. You don't even have any margin. So I'm thinking, let's imagine,
before we stop here, let's imagine there two types of teachers watching. One who thinks, she mentioned these things she's written. I want to see what Elena's written, or some materials, maybe things that they could go check out to get to know you. And maybe there's another teacher who's like, you know what, I want to maybe sign up for one of these coaching sessions with you directly. I'm ready to spend money on this now. For that first teacher, where should they go if they just want to sort of get to know you better and your ideas better?
Yeah, actually, for both groups, I encourage people to go check out my website on elenamotonono.com.
Okay.
And the first group will probably benefit the most, both actually signing up for the newsletter and seeing how the idea is really what I write, whether they strike the chord with them, and just give them some time. There's also an option of buying my books, which a lot of people that are just joining and they don't know what they need. The books are available on Amazon, and on my website, there's even a tab called books, so you can go and check them out. Okay. And I'm in the process of just releasing a new book too. Nice. So I really enjoy that. And I think it just helps people to get into the right mindset before they come for anything else.
Yeah.
so looking at that will help. And of course, I have a podcast and a blog that people
but the blog and the podcast, the best place still is go to your website, and then
yes, they're all on the website,
yeah.
and they're very easy to find.
The next and last thing, last but not least, what about the future? Do you see yourself continuing, writing more books? You just said you're releasing another one, developing what you're doing now further, or do you see any change on the horizon, any new direction you'll be going?
Yeah, for now, I am really content to be where I am. And I really I just started my podcast called Online Bound this year, and it's been a really good experience learning and also growing. I will continue with writing and creating programs and products for teachers. And for now, it's just the same thing, except I'm growing it and reaching new people, and also serving the people that have been with me for a while and seeing how they grow and their business, seeing what needs they have. So
that must be exciting when you see the progress people have made and different ways to help at different points along the way. Yeah. Yes. That's great. So nice to have you here, Elena. And we've known each other for a while now. But I learned a lot. Yeah, but we've never had a conversation where we really focused directly on what you do. So that was great for me. And I'm sure it was useful to teachers out there. So many teachers have questions about how they could be more independent and what are the things they need to do. And there's a lot of psychology about that. And you touched on a lot of it here. So that's why, you're just talking about support and then coaching, and like it makes a lot of sense to get help from people like you. So thank you very much for
thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that brings us to the close of another Featured Teachers. Thanks everybody so much for joining us. And we'll have another Featured Teachers coming up in November and other webinars. So stay tuned to the American TESOL Institute Facebook page and website. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.